Okay. We did Mise-en-scene analysis for Children of Men, which is focused on cinematography and direction.
So the first thing that we analyzed was like the split focus, and like there's different points of the films, but like the two ones that we put pictures of here were moments where Theo's like experiencing emotion while events are going on in the background, and usually these events contribute to his emotion. So on the image on the bottom part of the screen, it's where they were kind of having like that funeral for Julian, and he was just sitting behind the tree, like letting all of his emotions out while the events were still going on. And then right after like they finished doing it and they called him back over, he just snapped out of it and went back to like what he was doing. And then in the event in the top corner, it's where they were talking about like Julian and Theo's baby Dylan and like everything about him, and he was listening to the conversation at first, but then as they talked more about Dylan and they talked about his death, his like face went from like a kind of like a smirk to like just dead and like desolate.
The next thing that we decided to analyze was the long one takes in the movie. There's a few of these throughout the movie, but they're usually following Theo, the protagonist, and they're usually in times of heightened tension. And this method kind of helps to establish kind of fear in the audience, because it's putting the audience in the shoes of the character that we're following and making us feel their emotions of fear and making us feel the action in real time.
Another thing that forces the viewer to be inside of the shoes of Theo or whoever the subject of the camera is the claustrophobic takes that are prevalent throughout the scenes in the movie. So, for instance, when Julian was shot, the camera zoomed in really close to her, and you could see like the blood coming out of her, and everybody was kind of panicking in the car. It was very claustrophobic. It really forces you to feel the emotions that the people inside of the car were going through. On the other hand, in the top up here, when Jasper was shot, it was from far away, which distances the viewer from what's happening and really makes it seem remote. Another motif that appeared was the tunnel/hallways that you could see Theo or other characters going through repeatedly throughout the story. In the top two, or in the top where he first meets Julian, he goes through this tunnel and towards Julian, implying that he moves from the life that he had before in the city on the other side of the tunnel, working for the government, to the next plot point of he meets Julian and they begin their adventure. And then in the bottom, you have the tunnel that they went through. So they go through this tunnel from the dirty refugee camp to the super peaceful waters outside, and then eventually to the Human Project. So in all of these, the tunnels show changes in what happens in the plot.
So in the movie, like the camera shots, they were never like stable camera. The camera was almost always shaking with the scene. Like, so it wasn't always the same like the area that was in the shot. It would come in and out. Like, and the lack of stability on the camera is like sort of like the lack of control that Theo has over the situation. He can't control what's going on, and like the camera can't control itself. But I felt also like the shaky camera effect sort of gives the feel of a live documentary or a news report of like a war zone, where the camera person not only has to film, but they also have to like run with their large camera and dodge bullets, and within the chaos of the war zone still try to film.
And then another thing that was interesting was the lighting and the way they placed each character and what lighting. So in the scene where they went to the primary school after they watched Jasper die and they met Sid, Miriam and Theo were inside the classroom in like kind of darker lighting, talking about like how like the infertility in society, or like the no babies being born, has affected them in each part of their lives. But then outside you can see that Key's sitting in the light, and like with her baby, and kind of like it represents how like Key is the future, and she could bring to all this brightness into society by like giving birth to her baby.
So when Theo visited his cousin Nigel to get the papers, the music that played as he was entering the Ark was the song "The Court of the Crimson King." This song was released in 1969, and like the whole album is basically a criticism of the Vietnam War and the disconnect of the political leaders declaring war and like sending the soldiers out to die, and the disconnect between them and the soldiers that are fighting and dying in the war. Here it's a similar disconnect, except instead of between like the soldiers and the elites, it's between like the elite members of society who've managed to stay unaffected by the disaster because of their wealth, and like the average person. And these are represented by Nigel, who's like the elite, and the average British citizen. And what's the music choice really delivers the symbolism of this scene across, because that's what the point of the song was.